Welcome. It's our London Fashion Week Roundup panel discussion, and I have an incredible set of panellists. Everyone on Twitter was very excited. We're going to be reviewing all the London shows and talking about what you guys were excited by. But first, do you want to introduce yourselves, starting with Alex?
I'm Alex Fiore, and I'm the editor of Love magazine.
I'm Susie Lau, and I'm the writer of Style Bubble and freelance writer general.
Tim Blanks, editor-at-large of Style.com.
Emma Elwick-Bates, style editor of Vogue UK.
So first, Emma, you were talking about this just before we went live, but Burberry Men's showing in London. Are we all very happy? It's a credit to the might of London.
It was pretty much expected, to be honest, like from my perspective.
It makes sense with the brand because obviously they've put such investment with being back in London and having that presence here. It seemed like a natural progression, but obviously it's a big thumbs up for the men's collections and how they'll be viewed internationally.
I think it might have happened just a little bit sooner than everybody expected it would, which is a testament to how London is the fashion capital of the world right now.
That's a big credit to London. It's a nice way to start our roundup.
But I think
that's why I did it.
The men's collections has just been this phenomenal speedball of success. It seems.
Well, it was interesting because I spoke with some people at Burberry when the men's collections first started, and they sort of made the point that it took about 25 years for them to start showing the womenswear in London. So that it's quite interesting, I think, in that kind of context, that it would be the third season of the men's collections, and they're already bringing it back to London. Just an interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the audience kind of grows, and like the different kind of showgoers coming to London collections, and then how that will change now that Burberry's showing.
I'm interested in this idea of how people view London internationally, because that's one of the things that I found throughout our panels is people still don't really agree on. You know, people trot out that line of like, oh, it's seen as the young creative city, but at the same time, a lot of our panelists have said, you know, people like that's kind of not really the emphasis anymore. People do see it as kind of a dynamic commercial place. Like, what do you guys see? How are people viewing London on an international?
Well, I think the Burberry is obviously a big thing, but I think Tom Ford showing here was a moment, and then PPR's investment in Christopher Kane was another moment. So that I think there's a sense that now the train runs on two rails. There's the young creative thing, and there's also the really solid investment in the future. So I think creativity and commerce kind of coming together.
I think Tom Ford's a good example because he was someone that had the confidence and the finances to step out of fashion, and the fact that when he comes back he chooses to put that money and industry into London is quite phenomenal.
I think what's interesting is also publications actually making the investment to come to London on their own kind of budget, rather than the BFC kind of cajoling everyone, please come, and I think that's great, that people see London as a place that they have to cover now rather than an option.
And I think all those young designers are actually offering something almost quite conservative in some cases. Like, you look at the Simone Rocha show and it's not cutting edge, it's a mid-century beautiful coat in a new fabrication. But the buyers and the press are coming because I think they now know they can buy here.
But there's also, I think, I find talking to people, there's the joy of discovering or rediscovering London as a city. And just being here is so much more nourishing in a way than being in any of the other cities that people have been going to for years and years and years, like clockwork. And I think it's a big deal that people got to go to 10 Downing Street. I mean, you don't go to the White House when you're at New York Fashion. You can,
Lancaster House.
Yeah.
I've never been in Lancaster House
and
before.
And Lorraine Scott's location that engineers that incredible gilded hall in the Institute of Engineers, the Royal House of Engineers, whatever it was. It was insanely gorgeous.
It was fancy.
Yeah, it was fancy. Yeah. Like being in Florence, where you get to go to these incredible Renaissance places that you would never go to if you weren't at a fashion show. And London has that same, London has just been lying around waiting to be kind of reanimated in a way.
Milan and New York don't open up in that way.
I think it's interesting as well as a city, and it's something that used to kind of annoy me, but now it's something that I sort of embrace. It's not obsessed with fashion the way that you go to New York during New York Fashion Week and you're sat in a cab and you're watching adverts for New York Fashion Week in the cabs. And in Paris it's this kind of hysteria, and you don't really get that in London. And maybe it's because I live here as well, and the idea that I try and
you can go home and have some normality.
Exactly. But it doesn't feel, I think people maybe like it because there is something else. It feels like there's culture. And also I think that's why the fashion's fresh, because it's interwoven into the culture. It's not a kind of standalone thing.
Well, I suppose it's because, we would agree that London is the only genuine metropolis in the world where everything comes together. Every strand of every form of human thought or whatever, creativity, whatever, comes together in this city. And so there's always so much going on. That's what I mean about people rediscovering it. That even if you've been here before, it's very different for people when they come now because the city is changing so much.
I'm interested in this idea of, you mentioned kind of like why London is such a creative place, and whether it's things like the geography of the city. But people always talk about our amazing art schools here, and they say that's why London is such a creative place, and it's quite a good place to start with the St Martin's show. Nice little smooth link there. What did you guys think? Because I'd like to start by talking about the show, because obviously this was a great season for students, because LCF also did they showed as part of London Fashion Week. It was off schedule, but it was still a London Fashion Week show. What were your thoughts on the St Martin's show, and on the sort of college's output in general? Did you like the leather?
I thought it was a tighter edit this year.
Definitely.
From having known, because I did the MA there, whether that meant that Louise felt that it needed to be a very tight edit because there wasn't the talent there, or whether they just decided to do a slicker show. I felt it was a lot shorter.
It was a joke.
It was a lot shorter. It really was.
Which I felt was better because you actually, were paying much more
But I thought it was, Professor Louise Wilson
is
obviously one of the key figures in British fashion. She's been responsible for, she's sort of sitting at the root of everything that's happening now. And I thought it was intriguing that, she's so outspoken. She really does speak her mind, and sometimes in very unmediated ways. And sometimes you feel her intense despair at what is happening in the world of fashion. And I really felt with all these collections, they felt to me like her designers are trying to say, there is a reason to be optimistic. There is a reason to be hopeful. Like last time it was so pagan, this time it was very spiritual, I thought.
I really love this kind of like monastic lunar dresses, as they all like shuffled through at the end. You're right, there was an optimism there.
Priests and nuns.
Tarts and Vicars.
No, Tarts and Vicars is what you hate.
The past few seasons, I normally sit there thinking like, gosh, the men's wear is so much stronger than the women's wear. And I didn't actually feel that this time. I felt there was a more equal balance between men's, women's, textiles.
But a lot of the students that were showing were textiles for fashion students. That's one thing that I found quite striking.
But I think that's good, because that means, that's people going into the industry and working for bigger houses, if not necessarily standing out on their own.
I thought it was interesting that the winner who won actually did not one but two collections, and so she had the discipline to.
And one was a textile collection, one was a fashion.
Completely. And they looked like completely different collections to me.
Didn't she say she wasn't happy with it, and then she threw it out? It was because I remember.
I was wondering which one she wasn't happy with.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that a designer at that level in the industry has kind of the wherewithal to ditch something they've done and redo it again.
But there was a common thread, or rather a common rope between the two things that she showed.
They were both really kind of rigorous, and I think that can be said for
all
the collections.
Really ropey.
I was like, this pun is already
But just the volume, the length, the sort of the kind of sexlessness of the clothes, I thought was really interesting. That it was across the board. No, generally across the board.
Yeah.
It felt, this collection, St Martin's collection last time, there was a medieval thing, but it was more kind of Wicker Man-ish. And I thought it was intriguing that this season you can always see the students reflecting the work of the favourite St Martin's alumnus of the moment. And once upon a time it would have been somebody like Christopher Kane, and this season it was Sean Sampson and
Craig Green, actually. Quite a lot of Craig Green.
Yeah, I thought they all looked like they were going off to be sacrificed.
And the plaids and
Craig Green. Look at that.
greenery.
an
I
obsession
know it's
with.
men's, but can we talk a little bit about Craig Green?
Sorry.
Because I think he's just incredible. I'd like to know what you guys...
Really
Yeah.
good. I mean,
Yeah.
the reason why London will always be a creative hub, even if it's not, if it should ever fade from the headlines again, there'll always be people like him doing things. And you just don't see stuff like that anywhere else.
What's captured everyone about him so much? Do you think is it his kind of... Because his incredible techniques, the textures he uses and the way he plays with things. Is it that? What is it?
He's marrying art and commerce at their kind of most extreme levels and bringing them together in his work, and especially in his kind of latest collections. And then you might go to he's got loads of his pieces actually in the museum exhibit about monsters in Paris at the moment. And it looks incredible there as well. And the same when you see it on the rails. So I think he's kind of bringing two extremes together and doing it really well, and I think it's quite surprising actually.
But if you think that designers are bound by 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso and a head, and how that's a mold that say Rei Kawakubo's broken a number of times in the course of her career, and he does that too. It's just a completely
new perspective.
free way to approach design, I think.
And I think as much as we talk about kind of London growing up, designers, turning out collections that people want to buy, people want to wear, I think it's really, really important that London still has that essence of kind of
The naughty
complete
children.
bonkers.
Naughty kids that just sort of piss people off. That's what I like about Craig Green, that the Daily Mail is so affronted by what he does, which is always a sign of something really good when you're annoying the majority of people.
It's not annoying for the sake of annoying as well.
When you're getting a bee in the bonnet of the conservative majority, you know that you're doing something right, I think.
But the Daily Mail will always find,
Always hate fashion.
Yeah.
Well, this leads us nicely to Sibling, who they also hate.
They hate Sibling.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
What did they say about Sibling?
No, they gave a lot of coverage of our Kate Moss St. Bart shoot, which did feature Sibling.
So let's talk about some other highlights, because we use kind of St. Martin's as that point, and Louise Wilson's influence spreads across the industry in London, as you mentioned, Tim. So who else, whether a St. Martin's alumnus or not, struck your fancy this season? Who were the highlights? It's a big question.
Well, St. Martin's alumni dominate, always. It's Christopher Kane, Jonathan Saunders, America Transu, Richard Nicol.
Can we talk America Transu? I don't want to start a fight between Alex and Tim, but
Why?
let's talk America Transu.
I just thought that I was really the thing that I was trying to justify the reason why I said that somebody said yes, but London's just getting better and better, and I said, well, it's getting stronger and stronger, but stronger doesn't necessarily mean better. And I thought this season a few designers who I've always loved took risks that didn't quite pay off, and I think she was one of them. And I think she really her emphasis on she wanted to do something else. She wanted to push herself and emphasize construction rather than the thing that everybody loves her for. And it was an experiment that just didn't work for me, really.
I think it's a process though that when you're a designer that's had hit, it's quite nice to actually have a collection that's a little bit more divisive, a kind of not an off season, but a season where they're exploring something new. Yes, it didn't work out, but that's a good process to go through.
I agree.
And I mean, I went to see the collection, and I said I wasn't at all really moved necessarily, other than the kind of garbage soundtrack. And then when I went to see it and saw the techniques, and I was just like, she is still clever. She is still relevant.
It's amazing.
I went to see it in the showroom in Paris, and it's just flying off the rails. It's doing phenomenally well. It has done phenomenally well.
I mean, the fact that she's prepared to take the risk, the fact that Jonathan took a risk, the fact that Erdem took a risk. I mean, the fact that they could coast and just consolidate what they've already done and reap the whirlwind. But the fact that they're prepared to take their signature and twist it in a way that may not work. That's why London is great.
That they don't rest on their laurels.
I was saying it's volatile. That I think it's wonderful that you do not know what you're going to get when you go into a show. That it's not going to be the same predictable
Yeah.
thing.
I thought the Erdem show was one of the strongest he's ever done.
I agree.
I loved his turn to the dark side.
He did your wedding dress, didn't he?
He did do my wedding dress. That's totally biased. And if I got married again, I think I might, second wedding, black, feathers, high cross collar.
And what did you think of it?
I really liked it, actually. It was, but then I really like black clothes.
Yeah. And I really...
All of my favourite collections are black leather. I've realised, I sort of had an epiphany yesterday that everything I like is black leather. So anything that
I
looks
like black
a black leather
patience,
collection.
I like black texture, I like
So I like
black
this season
embroidery.
because this season's all about black things that look like black bin liners, which is sort of my thing.
Paging Dr. Freud.
Yeah. And him bucking his kind of prettiness that is, it's going to sell, it's going to be
actually would
popular,
have liked it if
it's
he
quite
just
nice.
kept to the black, or just the black and the blush, because I think when there were those signature
The smothered
florals,
ostrich.
which I guess there were people sat there waiting for those, but
You didn't like the smothered ostrich? That was my favorite.
I like the
piece.
smothered
I like the ostrich and I like the black.
Suffocated ostrich.
Yes.
But I think the interesting thing, kind of what you said, Susie, is this idea that whether you love a collection or you hate a collection, it at least there's a reaction to it, which means that it's good on some level. I hate going into a show and seeing a collection then coming out and not really knowing what I thought of it. It's just sort of like I was sat there and some clothes
You
went
want to
past
be
me.
challenged.
Yeah. And if I hate it, I kind of have more respect for a designer if I come out thinking that was absolutely frightful. Because as long as I don't think it's frightful because it's lazy. If I just think if it doesn't hit what I'm feeling, at least it's hitting something.
Well, but see, I think inconsistency is kind of is exciting because it's kind of organic. Everything isn't wonderful all the time, and I think that what was really impressive in this season is that people took risks, and the risks didn't pay off. They paid off less than they
Partially. They paid off partially.
Yeah.
They worked less than they. Whatever.
There were some offbeat nuances to the season, but
think
without those, it would be New York.
Well, what
which is
Christopher
always
Kane did was
smooth sailing.
interesting because he said backstage that he hadn't edited it. It was the first collection he hadn't edited, and I think for me the interesting thing was that there were parts of Christopher Kane that I loved and there were parts that I really didn't like. But that there was that almost in one collection there was that fight between taste.
Yeah,
and
normally
you
I
come
would
out
advise
thinking,
a designer for a strong edit,
But as
and
well,
I
I
have to
came
say,
out
I did
remembering
sit
the
back
stuff
and
I
I was
loved.
quite enjoying the different waves of it.
Yeah.
But then people said it needed to be edited, and you thought if the 15 looks that you didn't really respond to had been edited out of it, it would have been an amazing collection. I still think it was an amazing collection.
It was.
For me, I took away what I
Prototype.
loved from
Yes,
that show.
I
I
did
didn't
as well.
think of the
Yeah.
things that I didn't like. I thought of loving all the feathers and loving the sort of weird
Yeah, the ideas I
fluffy
wasn't.
thing at the end. Like that sort of stuff.
The ideas I wasn't so hot
They were
on.
brain neurons, I think.
Did grow actually, and now eventually the whole collection has just sort of
I love
hits
the
you,
brains too.
Yeah.
like on
You
different
love the
levels.
brains.
It is
I
London's
loved the
brainiac.
brains.
I like the brain.
I love the feathers.
Maybe the
The
pockets.
feather
That rosette
sweaters.
feathers?
I like
the
the.
feathers. Did you see the all over feather sweater? It's like
Yes.
8,000
Yeah.
euros.
Yes.
It's
It's
amazing.
But
beautiful.
I like the
amazing.
return to the kind of the velvet
Wasn't
twinge
crazy.
X-rays.
Wasn't crazy about those.
No, me neither. But everything else, it was just. He's just got so many ideas,
Yes.
and it's like, how does
Yeah.
how does he harness that for the future? Like when.
Well, he will,
I like
because he
the
always
velvet
has.
Yeah.
I think there was an exuberance here. I got my deal. I feel like celebrating, and I thought it was exuberant. And he stands alone. You're right
Yeah.
about the torrent of ideas and how fully realized they are. And the depth of them too. You go away and you think about what you saw with him. I think.
Do we know what kind of feathers they were? Were they goose?
They look like quail.
I just
On
wondering.
the sweater, they were like
Wondering
pheasant
What is
dyed.
being
Pheasant.
multi-plucked at the moment?
Because they've been curled on the sweaters. I think.
Yeah, they were curled.
I'm interested in this idea that we've kind of all touched on of a collective sort of change of mood, because we've all talked about how there were a number of designers who took risks or who changed things up a bit this season. And I guess it's the same as when there's a trend. What makes designers kind of have this moment all in their sleep where they go, we all need to do something. And I felt that there was this definite shift with London. Is it because, as Tim said, is it because there's more of a focus on it? Were people feeling more of a pressure? Why did people feel this need to kind of up their game?
I think, I don't know why it all went dark. I don't know why it all
went
dark
dark,
at the same
yeah.
time. But I think that these people are genuinely creative people who aren't just in business to make money. They're testing themselves, and they all had super strong seasons last season. And so with all the accolades that were attached and the sales and everything, and they're not the kind of people who are just going to say, "Oh, I'll do it again." You know?
There isn't that arrogance to London.
No.
And this is the idea of kind of how you take a brand or how a designer takes their work forward, and I'm always interested in that. And I think that's something that I was really intrigued by with the Mary collection, because there's I think there is this idea that surrounds London that the schedule changes very often, and you know that in 5 years' time we won't see a lot of the designers showing now still showing then, and it's a sad side of London, and I think that's why people often refer to it as being this kind of creative city of young designers. And it got me thinking about how you become a Christopher Kane and how designers can hope for that. And I was thinking about something like Medium Kirchhoff, where you think how like Benjamin and Edward, how are they going to take things forward, and how do you keep?
I think they came on leaps and bounds though this season.
I love
it was
the
a real
collection.
turning point for me, and I'm a hardcore Medium fan. I am like one
You're
of
the Medium
those,
girl, aren't you?
yeah, those, you know, I am one of those girls in bedrooms like clicking at Tumblr and just like basically like saving and scrapbooking everything. But this season it just felt like something had clicked for them, that yes, they have their spirit, but you know, at the same time they need to sell.
I prefer this more literary side of them to the kind of Sugar Plum Fairy,
Maybe
Dustins
the men's
and
collection was a
Sprinklings.
kind of exorcism in a way.
That's me, like this for
Definitely,
me.
they were very linked.
But for me, I'm not a massive Medium Kirchhoff fan, but this I thought was one of the best things I saw in London, because all of a sudden there was a reality to it. It wasn't this, you know, fantasia of
Exactly.
4
'Cause that
fluffy
I
dresses
find
with a
that
make-believe price tag on them.
Quite repellent. This
Exactly.
I
It
kind
was-
of was into and wanted to send it.
There was stuff that I want to see people wear, the stuff
But
that I
still
wear.
with
said
that
it was a study
fantastical
in
element there.
perfection.
The
And I
world.
do prefer this more refined.
People talked about it like it was them growing up. Is that fair? Do you think that's what it was?
I don't know if they would like to see it that way, because I think and if you look maybe like 4 seasons ago, before they did all the tinsel and the fairy tale, they were actually very, very dark. You know,
Well,
they
they
were
did,
doing
and
that kind of
it's
distressing
minimalism.
denim and
it's
menswear. And
not that grown up. I mean, it was half street cast. You know, there is that kind of like younger element to it.
But it doesn't feel, in the past, it's felt sort of, for me, almost repellently young. It's something that I've wanted to distance myself
And I don't
from,
like tokenism,
you know,
riot girl. Sometimes it can
Exactly.
just get too much.
It's
Where
not- I
there's
don't want to
true
look
beauty
like-
here.
I don't want to look like an 18-year-old with purple hair wearing, you know, frilly
tiara.
socks in East London. That's not what I want to look like, and it's not what I want to see people
But
look like. It's not something that I react
You're
to.
not taboo.
Exactly.
But you can't deny that they have actually like really influenced a generation of girls to like dream and to you know kind of concoct their Medium-esque visions. Even actually, there's like, you know, you can see Medium fangirls like not wearing Medium because they can't afford it, but that kind of look. And I think that's really interesting that they've inspired like a generation
But
of
do you
girls
not
to
think
do
that's
that.
just like the individualistic generation? That's how they dress anyway. You know, people are all about.
No,
it's
I
just-
see it with
But
Medium in particular because
But
I see
think
it
it's
all over
clicked in with the
Tumblr. You know?
90s. It's clicked in with the
90s
90s
nostalgia.
revivalism and nostalgia. It's just the right time, and they've sort of clicked in with the way a lot of people are thinking, I think.
But it's not a strategic thing on their part because that is what they're
No, I know
like.
it's not, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily that they're dressing a generation. Also because the generation can't wear their clothes, it's far too expensive.
They don't mind that. I think they like people. We're having a bit of a Medium off,
Yeah.
I like
aren't we?
this. Good argument. I'm gonna sit back.
But we
I did
love this
but I
collection.
loved
We love this
because it felt
collection.
like it consolidated, and it just felt like it was proper clothes.
Yeah.
And that's what I've liked this season, when it's been sort of, you know,
Yeah.
proper clothes that I want to see people wear, rather than some kind of, you know, jokey. It didn't feel too fashioned. I
Yeah.
think that's what I liked about it.
And I actually do like the fact that there's bits that echo back to the Witch collection, which sold very well
Yes.
for then. And I think we all want Ben and Ed to, you know, be commercial successes and
Just
continue
felt
with
clean.
their vision.
I think maybe that's what I like. It felt very clean and focused, which is something that I always say whenever I like anything. It's clean and focused, because I get what they want me to get from this. You know, it looks like Picnic at Henry Rock.
But like I said though, I do think though that if London just sort of like cleans itself completely and like is all about focus, I feel like something that's the thing that's really magical about London would be lost.
It won't happen.
It won't happen.
No.
Good.
It won't happen. I don't think so. I think that's what this season was about. People might be focused, but they focus on what they're doing, but what they're doing isn't the same thing every time. So what shifts is the thing they're focused on. So that means it's always changing. Makes sense.
Even someone like an Ashley Williams, that's focus, but you know, it's a different focus to J.W. Anderson.
Let's talk about J.W. Anderson, because we were talking about it before. What did you think of this season?
Did you get that?
Everyone's like, turn to
I
Tim.
didn't see it. I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
You didn't see it.
I
I saw that, yeah.
Precise, really scarily precise actually for me. Really, I don't know, I really loved it.
Yeah. Alex, you look...
I think it's just interesting. I think with what Jonathan does is this idea of building a brand, and I think he's very aware of it. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's sacrificing creativity, which with some people they start to talk about themselves as a brand, and immediately you think it's it's the death knell for anything sort of interesting.
I look at these images and I immediately think modern and relevant.
I'm interested in this idea of building...
And then I like this kind of like crazy hiccup that happened in the middle, that kind of like 90s brand.
I guess I was just talking about a 90s revival. I mean, this feels very sort of 1999.
I don't know.
But at the shows, that we heard Garbage, we heard Nirvana, like I felt, the playlist, and then, there's plays we're hearing and the playlist that we're seeing. And the mini skirt with the trainer there, that's all very 90s.
I think just for me, I understand why sort of fashion journalists got really irked when the 70s were revived, because it's kind of, I remember this, and remembering it being revived, it is slightly unnerving when you're sort of unpicking references from your own suburban
But
past.
then, you've got your Everyone Loves an All Saint baggy trouser, but then, the mink bandeau is totally new. It's definitely something I've not seen.
Where elements have been referential in J.W. Anderson's collections previously, I felt like this season he was really kind of striving for something new, even though they were recognisable elements from, maybe 90s Helmut Lang or Jill Sander.
What was the story he told? He always has a
I don't
character.
believe I went backstage to hear his story. I don't know, actually.
Enormous hole in our knowledge.
I should know this. I do know this because
I remember the show had a very interesting title.
Yeah, can we look up the title of J-Dubs, because we've all got a J.W. Anderson.
He's fearless in his conceptualizing of his clothes.
Yeah.
The conceptual that can be worn. And
I like the fact then it's undercut with that great navy cashmere jumper.
But this ties into how he builds his brand, doesn't he? Because I feel like he's so comfortable talking about his clothes in quite a lofty way, but it never feels annoying with him, I don't think.
I just think you look at that and it just
also
breeds confidence. Whether you like the aesthetic or not, it's
He's kind of unashamed about talking about product, though, in a way that maybe many London designers are not into talking about. He loves talking
but
product.
I think he's that generation where they're more comfortable with that. Like, that's what I really love about Simone Rocha, is her stuff is so beautiful and kind of whimsical in this amazing way, but she's also she's such a savvy, smart girl, she's just really refreshing to talk to because she knows where she needs to be. And I think it's
I think the generation of the Jonathans and the Richards, I think it took them longer to realise, okay, here's the fanfare, now it's a business. Where I feel it's at Simone's, JW's, they've known they've got to make it work as a business from day one.
But if you also think that he's a student of Nuccia Prada's, I get her and what he does.
And he
takes
a lot of influence from
He doesn't really like that though, does he?
No, I mean in the way that she combines a really quite a complicated and sometimes quite alienating thought process with the actual act of creating clothes. Or product that isn't necessarily desirable. It can be quite confrontational. But
there's something about it that makes you want to have it. I think it's that weird...
Or makes you want to think about it.
It's almost, you almost want to fight it till you get to the dressing room.
He was interesting actually, because it's interesting you mentioned Prada, because he does do that thing also where he kind of... And I think this is him just being a bit, cheeky, but I talked to him about his men's collection afterwards, and he was like, I don't know why people found it so shocking. He was like, it wasn't about them being, naked or in girls' clothes, it was about proportion. And he is quite happy to kind of play the game in that sense, and, be a bit like, you say it's this, I'll say it's that, which I think is fun with him, especially given that in other contexts he's so happy
He's
to
a
talk
mercurial
about.
character.
Yeah, he's a great one.
But I think there are some designers that just will focus on that sort of
Melina
thing.
Mercurial.
I always remember Galliano talking about sort of his Matrix collection and going on about Napoleon, how it was inspired by Napoleon's troops and the idea of Napoleon's troops' clothes being cut to make them look taller and more menacing. And then you were like, but it's the Matrix and English hunting, like it's not Napoleonic, but for him it was all this Napoleonic exercise in proportion. And kind of the same with McQueen and Bumsters, and that being about elongating the torso.
Or Vivienne Westwood with the Seditionaries muslin tops that were based on Elizabethan.
And the skirts were
Elizabethan
Greek
clothes.
peasant costume or something, which is, I guess with some designers, it's the idea that we look at it and see something very different to what they look and see.
Can we get, what was the, let's go to Greg.
Semiology.
Semiology of the self.
There was something about domestic onanism
Oh,
that I got
wanking at
told.
home.
Yeah, basically.
But I like the kind of, it's interesting, when Tim right at the start of the discussion, we were talking about this like Britishness and this like the wider culture we have in London. And I found that quite interesting with this season and also with the men's, that people looked at Britishness and British quirks. And I always find that really great when London designers do that. And I like that with his men's, he looked at like that British kind of
Fabrics.
yeah. But also like the idea of kind of what we're like as English people.
There was a lot of, if you think about all the other cities, there was a lot of British fabrics happening, and I think I think that's possibly, it's in on people's minds, and
Yeah, but there were quite a few in the other cities, like caricatures of Britishness, which I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with.
Well, I think the weird thing is there's a lot of designers in London that aren't British or aren't English. JW's Irish, so I think there is still that alien looking at London. It's an alien place, and people. There is still this idea of people dressed up in arcane costume. And I think maybe London is the only place where you really get that.
Yeah.
You have a queen and you have beefeaters and you
I
have all
I
this
think Britain, if you think
regalia.
of country houses and the way people would dress in country houses over the
Prince Charles on Country Fire.
just ages over the Mitfords or whatever. I think that I've always thought it was interesting that fashion was never valued in England the way it was valued in other countries. It was style that was important. That was always a difference. That through the 70s, all those club things were about style, not fashion, and the British do style better than anybody else. And I also think that's why a strong sense I've always had here is designers is so good because they honestly had nothing to lose, and that there's just this fearlessness because they're not aiming for a penthouse on Park Avenue. They're in their flats in Hackney and Dalston and so on, and they're not. They do what they do because they want to do it and they love doing it, not because they want to be multimillionaires.
It's a lot to do with looking to themselves as well. Like I think, like Louise Gray, for instance, is a really good.
So much more personal.
Yeah, it's like reflecting yourself rather than exotica, which I think really works for a lot of British designers.
But they are exotic. They're exotic creatures in themselves.
Yes, but they're looking. But it's all them. It's not external influences.
And going back to the country house, it's like creating uniforms. As in this is the Louise Gray uniform, and JW, that was his uniform, and that appreciation of that structure.
But the idea of the dressing up box, which is kind of at the root of
Very Westwood.
and
Dressing
beyond.
It's very interesting given because we had our New York roundup this morning obviously, and we talked a lot about this idea of you shop the head to toe look, and I think we've done it in this panel. We've talked about like the JW Anderson girl and that kind of sense, but you never have that idea in London that people adore brands like Susie, you said I love medium ketchup, but people don't kind of shop the look in that way you see elsewhere. And I think this goes back to what you're saying about style, is that kind of element of diversity. And do you think it is that kind of streety element to how people pull stuff together that's kept London feeling
Individual. I mean, it could be the street. It could be the street. It could be the country house. It's just really people not being directed to dress. I think the way they the way there was a sort of there were criteria in other cities. And, you know, in Paris, you dressed a certain way. I don't... I'm sure Alex could correct me because he knows more
I'm
about
really
this
waiting
than
for
I
your
do.
bank of historical...
I just think that people... You know,
I was just thinking maybe it's because we're all forced to wear school uniform here and the other places aren't, and there's that kind of idea of you're actually rebelling against uniformity, whereas everyone else is eager to dress in a uniform to be part of
But
a
I think
flock.
within
We've
your
grown up that
rebellion,
way.
though, you've got your own, you know, left field uniforms.
Yeah, within the uniform, you get used to... Also, minimal resources. People, you know, the notion that people were just not wealthy here, and people live in small places, and so your life is outside. You know, your life is about display in a way. Everybody's not sitting around in fabulous 18th century apartments like they are in Milan or Paris or wherever. You know, their lives are in pubs and clubs, and being social means they're more conscious of how they appear to other people. So there's more of that sort of, I don't know, maybe peacockery or something. I always think about that with punk and glam.
And I think in
mods
London people don't worry about the taste barometer as much. And I think that's why we get some of these odd fabrications or combinations, you know, that whether you like the aesthetic, you know, you can be in Milan and New York and there's this kind of like consciousness, although kind of...
I'm interested that we mentioned that, you know, designers they're individuals and they do it because they love it, which I think is a brilliantly positive way of looking at things. But it goes back to what we were talking about with Louise Watson.
But you disagree.
Amazing. No, I do disagree, but I remember I think it was when I did an interview with Colin McDowell, and he talks about this a lot, where he talks about, you know, people go to fashion school now to be famous, and he was like, the fashion schools in London, they churn them through knowing full well that like 1% of them will actually go on to do something. And do you worry that that's changed? Do you worry that London's becoming like a circus in the way that other cities are, and people no longer do it because they love it, they do it because they want to be rich, they want to be famous?
I think to become a designer?
I
don't think so at all.
I think it's so incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
It's such a lot of hard work, and it's so bloody expensive to be a fashion designer. Costs you money to be a fashion designer. I think you've got to be absolutely convinced of what you want to say and the way you want to say it and what you want to make, and that you want to do all of that through fashion, and that you couldn't do it through costume or by working for another house. You've got to be so convinced of what you want to do.
It's not really a fast track to fame and luxury.
And especially in London, where it's, you know, there are so many kind of different sponsorship routes. Like, you know, in New York, the designers there are mostly self-funded. You know, they have they come from money,
and that's reflected in the work they produce as well, because it's
then here it's kind of hand to mouth kind of living for a lot of designers, you know.
I mean, I think when you're, you know, when you ask a designer if you can order something and they need you to pay for it now so they can pay to have it made, I think that's quite, you know, you can't imagine that situation anywhere else. Like in Milan, all of these old Milanese labels, I'm going to talk while Tim's adjusting his microphone. In Milan, all of these old Milanese labels were started, you know, people like Versace and Armani were started in the 70s, and they were backed by money from textile magnates, which the textile magnate took on the overheads of the business and took a stake in that business, which is why something like AFA is involved in so many different businesses and manufacturing their clothes. And here you have none of that. You have to use your own money. You have to find your own places to produce it. It's an incredible struggle, I think, for a designer to actually just make clothes.
That's why Christopher Kane must be a slight sigh of relief now.
Even him, someone who was really successful for a really long time, I'm sure he's incredibly grateful for the injection of investment, you know, like that gives him like so much more freedom.
And if you never have to ride in that elevator to his studio again, he'd be so grateful. I swear I was going to die in that thing.
I'm feeling he's going to be staying there, no?
Oh, I hope he puts in a new lift.
PPR, please get me a new lift.
To share in London for a little bit longer.
Do you worry with London that it's going to become a launch pad where people, because, you know, there was a lot of agitation that we were going to lose?
I think there was that fear, but I think that's quickly dissipated.
I think London is now finally strong enough, you know, to hold its own and to keep its designers.
And the British people who are working in other cities, all they want to do is come back. You know, there's no British designers in Paris and Milan saying move here, it's amazing.
I do worry though that there's so much on the London schedule.
Yeah.
It's sort of when we talked about what are your highlights, and I'm like, well, I woke up at 9 o'clock every morning, and I went to bed at like 1 o'clock every night because you had to see everything.
Well, you know what the solution to that is.
Can you give up a day, please? Or two? A day or two, like...
Let's make this an official plea that we get a few extra days. But then actually, we were talking about
putting
this
it out
morning,
there.
and that's what's good about London in a way, because I think there's an element of inclusivity to it, because you do see everything, whereas if it was longer, people skip days. So
but at the same time, I do think that it's a finite schedule, and I'm not a fan of this 45-minute gap in the show.
There was madness when it was the Tate Britain, Tate Modern, Tate Britain, Tate Modern, Tate Britain, Tate Modern day.
I have a feeling...
With the 45-minute...
that
was
which
crazy.
just doesn't work. It's, you know...
And there's no taxis.
I have a feeling with Natalie Massenet now... at BFC, she will be instilling some changes, and first thing will be the schedule. I heard they might be moving some designers kind of to the Saturday to kind of encourage
friendly spin on the season.
to encourage people
friendly spin.
encourage people to come earlier.
Running.
For sure. But do you think there's
running in heels?
Do you think there's an element to the London thing where, you know, that's part of its quirk? Because I feel like I'm so interested by what you said right at the start of this, Tim, about this idea of, you know, it's almost the experience of London. I think that idea of like running from something to the next thing, it's become...
I'm not a fan of that kind of quirk. I'm not a fan of a quirk that means you can't get a
taxi. But that also interferes with... That interferes with what we need to do, what buyers need to do. Know that there are wonderful things being missed, or people arriving late for something,
people
not
make
getting
educated edits of the day, which is sad.
But it's a business at the end of the day. It's just you want it to be run like a business, which I think now it is being. I think people have realised that, and there's this greater consciousness that people aren't doing this just for fun. You know, they want it to be a business. It's important. And people need to see this sort of stuff, so it needs to be manageable and it needs to be achievable for teams to see as much as possible. I mean, you don't want to have to skip things.
And it still has really only been such a short time for it to reach this point. And that's just a growing pain, really. But the 45-minute thing for sure is
it's crazy.
A
you
day
mentioned
or two,
buyers, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit, about whether you think that the buyers that we have here in London and Britain are supportive enough of the talent we have here. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Where does everyone stand on?
I just think they have constraints, you know, that we're not... I don't think our budgets are like necessarily bigger. They're probably getting smaller, if anything, in stores, kind of in the domestic market. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of constraints with what they can do in terms of supporting.
And there's also e-commerce
British
constraints,
designers.
then, you know, something has to be, you know, shoppable, lay down flat. And, you know, quite a lot of our favourite collections we've talked about here, you know, it hasn't got that appeal, and I think the buyers are very aware of that.
Like, I think it's crazy that Louise Gray only... even, you know, she's been having kind of critically acclaimed collections. She only has one singular stockist, which is Machine A, which just opened this season. That's crazy.
I mean, I think on the flip side of that, we talk about, do we feel that buyers should be supporting young talent? Yes, if the clothes are selling. I don't think people should be giving handouts, and I've heard buyers
or
say
just
to
waving
me,
a flag, I buy British.
but people say to me,
It's
I believe so much in their talent, and yes, we do have 80% of the collection and 75% marked down now, but I believe so much in what they're doing, and I'm like, but if no one wants it, then I wouldn't really believe in it, which is a tough thing to say, I think. It's just almost like, if no one wants this, then you can't keep buying it.
Shops are not charities.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
But don't you think the internet has really, London's benefited from it?
Oh,
I think e-commerce has helped London fashion grow in a way that it hasn't, you know, with what's happening with Net-a-Porter, what's happening with the corner and Mike Teresa. That in a way that's the city it's what's incredible. Another incredible thing about the city is it's in a way it's not quite the birthplace of men's fashion, but it's also, you know, at the other extreme, it's at the cutting edge of a new way to see a new way to see fashion, a new way to experience fashion.
What's so new about it?
Oh, and I'm just saying that you have to fill in the gap.
No, because it's a question that we always talk about.
A new way to experience fashion.
Here at SHOWstudio, we talk about, you know, how like Nick's, obviously it's very dear to him about how we're going to change how, whether it's the way in which the public relate to fashion, whether it's how they view it and when they can buy it and all that kind of thing. And we talked a lot about how the schedules are packed and how, how buyers relate to the clothes that they're seeing, and is there going to be a change in the industry? Are we going to see it so people can buy stuff straight away? Are we going to see it so, like what's going to happen? Because
I think
people talk a lot about how it's
designers
not sustainable.
Especially in London, for some reason they're a little bit kind of a web averse, I would say, compared to other, especially into New York. I think a lot of them could actually do with like developing their own e-commerce strategies, which a few of them are doing. It's in progress, and I think that will change things, because then they can control the situation. They don't have to rely on stockists or this or that, and they can do different things with their own e-commerce. Obviously it's not right for everybody, not everyone can do it, has the kind of infrastructure to do it, but I think that would be a good first step to do, and also to develop a website. Christopher Kane, I think 10 years or whatever without a website is pretty like just
I think it's whether you view yourself as a designer or a brand, so very much I think he's becoming a brand, but I think that was just never on his
I think
agenda.
An interesting thing that I talked about that I keep thinking about again and again was, it actually came about last season when I was comparing spring to winter's Comme des Garçons, and the idea of this two-dimensional fashion and then three-dimensional fashion. And I was talking with Amanda Harlock about it and going off on a rant like we normally do. And then we started to talk about the fourth dimension, which is actually getting inside a garment, and the fact that you could only understand these Comme des Garçons things by putting them on and figuring out where they lay on your body. And I think that sort of fashion London is very good at, is fashion that you sort of need. It's something that Westwood did in the 80s, and Galliano, fashion you have to put on to understand. And what that actually does is it motivates you to buy the stuff, or at least to go to a shop and try it on. It's that sort of, and I think it's such an important thing, the fact that you can't figure out what a fabric is unless you touch it. You can't figure out how it's going to fit unless you get inside a garment. And there's something that's very unique about this idea that now e-commerce is so ubiquitous that you've got to seduce people into interacting with garments again. It feels like such an old-fashioned thing, but I'm very interested in that idea and in the way that London designers, I think, they're so focused on creating kind of innovative, interesting textiles and cuts that things like with Mary, it was very much about experimenting with cut around the body and how that would sit on your body. You can only comprehend it by trying it on.
I think
Which
that
is
will
just an
be
interesting
couture,
idea,
isn't it?
What?
It's almost like a couture, isn't it?
Exactly.
I think your
it's-
relationship with your clothes.
Exactly. It's just the fact that you have to physically interact with a garment, and it's almost like this weird reaction. It's the naughty child reaction against the digital age of fashion, where people are pre-ordering clothes and you're going to get it 6 weeks after the show. The reaction against that are clothes that you have to go and handle to comprehend. And I think there's something very interesting in that, and it's interesting that different designers seem to be sort of subconsciously picking up on it and dealing with textiles and creating something really inventive and innovative that demands for you to interact with it.
But I think there'll also be interesting ways of presenting that facet through, through a digital spectrum eventually.
I mean, I like the videos that Net-a-Porter do, which give you an idea of how it interacts on the body. And the other thing, of course, is the wonderful thing that Net-a-Porter and Ukes in the corner do, is the idea you buy it, you try it on, you send it back. It only costs you to have it shipped out to you, which is great. I do that. It's, it's fantastic to have someone carry it across to me. It feels quite decadent to sort of have something. It's quite couture to have someone send something to me and then I try it on and then I send it back because I don't like it.
Wear it once and then...
Exactly.
See if it goes with your accessories.
It's a bit like a savings account, because you buy all of these clothes and then the money is ephemeral and tied up, and then you get it all refunded and you pay a tax bill.
I think Net-a-Porter even sends out on the same day, so it's literally
really good.
Instant. It's practically teleportation.
I'm
waiting for that day to happen.
That's the future of fashion.
Haven't they already figured out how to move an animal or something
3D
through
no. You mean Star Trek,
teleportation.
that kind of...
Yeah.
This is not the angle I thought this discussion
No.
I swear I read something like this.
What's
okay,
it
maybe
called?
And immediately you
let's-
started to apply it to clouds.
yes, of course.
But then a fly
Think
gets
of
in
the
the thing.
possibility.
Yeah, exactly. And
It arrives all hairy.
A mangled up Christopher
beautiful
Kane
evening
dress.
That'd
Yeah.
be quite good. It looks like the ones at the end of Christopher Kane, actually, the hairdressers.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of static tape, but in fact had like kind of little strands of beading, which I didn't get from the catwalk. Because they were moving so fast, it looked like that kind of tinsel tape. There was actually
Yeah,
little
no, I thought it was like
strands.
tinsel mohair or
It's
something.
little strands of beads, like all looped. Yeah, which I loved.
I'm conscious that it's incredibly hot, so I want to try and bring this round. Is there anyone we've missed that really struck you
Richard
guys?
Nichol.
Thomas Tate.
Richard Nichol.
Let's talk
Oh,
about Richard
Thomas
Nichol
Tate.
and then we'll talk about Thomas Tate. Tell me about Richard Nichol.
Well, I
Simply,
thought Richard
we've not
Nichol's
talked about
collection was
Simply.
wonderful. I
Yeah,
thought,
it was a good.
you know, he's, you know, I said at the beginning, the inconsistency makes London so exciting. And he is a designer that you just, after an amazing men's collection, this is entirely personal opinion, I thought his last men's collection was, I was so elated after the first one. The last one, I felt a bit let down. And then this women's wear just totally kicked him back to the top of the pile. I thought it was great. I love the sense. I love the sense of somebody who's been struggling in a way to find his voice, and who doesn't have the confidence, you know, that, and just
He
is
doesn't
always
get the attention
and,
as
well,
well.
and I thought this collection was great. So I really hope it.
It whispered with sophistication.
I really liked with Richard that the program notes credited lingerie, but I couldn't see any of it. But it kind of mattered that you knew it was there, that you knew that that he'd thought about it, and that because there was that kind of sexiness to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's always good when he does sexiness because it's
Yeah.
never conventional. When he first started doing the stuff with
exactly.
Linda was so that amazing first Linda collection where sending out
I
pastel
love that.
lingerie as a winter collection was extraordinary. And I felt you got the sense again with
And the
with
boudoir
this.
sense.
Exactly. But
But
with
this-
this, you got that sense again.
But it's always, is Isabella Rossellini in the slip and blue velvet? You know, that
Yeah.
there's always with him that always has been with him, that slightly fetishistic edge, which
Yeah,
makes
sure.
the collections.
Mohair sweater and a patent skirt.
Yeah.
He seems to
Like
have
your
struck
dream
a,
sexiness in London.
he seems to have struck
Yeah.
a balance though.
No, it was a sexy London.
Yes.
You know.
Range sexy. Yeah.
like
What do you
weird,
think was
sexy.
sexy? What was sexy?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of clavicle. There was a lot of cleavage. There was the strange
You're
capy
quite obsessed with
corsets of
clavicles this
Jonathan.
season, aren't you?
I am. I'm quite clavically obsessed. The furry one at Richard.
But I think it was fetishy rather than sexy. I don't know, it felt kind of like...
yeah,
Which I guess is very British, sort of the
Yes.
English vice.
yeah.
But also I just think, in autumn, winter, seeing so much like clavicle in day wear at Christopher Kane with the big fur bandeau, J.W. Anderson, once again it's that kind of, it's quite decadent and
But all the
subversive
vinyl, like
to wear a
Jonathan-
bandeau in the day. We're not Hitchcock women, but maybe
But then
maybe
Jonathan
next season
Saunders
we will
collection,
be.
the idea of, and I think it's David Lynch women this season, not Hitchcock women. But
Darker.
which is the Hitchcock woman a few decades down the road. But
Bit
With
dirty.
90s
Jonathan
twist.
Saunders collection, the vinyl, that this sort of, there was. Is it my imagination, or was there a lot of vinyl?
There was loads of vinyl.
There
wasn't
were
there?
Loads
there
of
was
vinyl.
there was vinyl
Like sort of
and
red light
painters
so
and-
the
Yeah,
red
there's
light
tons.
Soho
We can
thing,
go to
you know?
it.
Binliners.
There was
Binliner,
there was the
lots of
white
binliner.
kind of
We haven't
vinyl.
talked about Mario Schwab either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Burberry, Christine Keeler.
Christine
Latex.
Keeler. Yeah. And
And those latex like bodices.
who were the
yeah.
other bad girls who people talked
Mandy
about?
Rice
But,
Davis.
Mandy
yeah,
Rice, and somebody talked. No,
I'm
somebody,
not sure if anyone did, but I do wish
No.
someone...
bad
referenced
girls of an
Mandy Rice
appreciation of
Christine
luxury
Keeler, and then somebody
fabrication.
else who talked about bad girls.
Davis. Band of
Isn't
Gold.
that who you want to be?
It's quite Band of Gold, actually, isn't it? Do you remember Band of
Yes. Yeah. There was Viv Nicholson. Peter Janssen
Gold? Oh, yeah.
was inspired
Yeah.
by Viv Nicholson, and there
Isn't it?
was
That's what I was talking about, those kind of cutaway corsets. Not pushing up, just pushing forward.
Tits.
not a good look.
Tits is the word you're looking for. There were
Yeah.
lots of tits.
Yeah.
Again, I think Jonathan Saunders, like you said, was also trying to break out or break free or something this season.
I agree.
And
for sure.
in part it wasn't it didn't feel like Jonathan to me, but maybe that's what he was striving for. I don't know how you feel, because you're a long time Jonathan.
No, I felt like,
fan.
really. I felt like, no, exactly what I said. I felt that he was trying to. I mean, look how sick that is. That's dead salmon, farrow and gold, isn't it? That colour.
What, the olive oil?
No, the
background?
pink
Oh, the
one.
pink.
Yes, the pink. Is that
Dusky
dead salmon?
pink.
Was it dusty pink? That's. I just felt he really was trying to push it. He was quite. He got quite caught up in this idea of like bad.
It's kind of
bad
70s nipple
sex.
colour.
What are they called?
Nipple
Oreols?
pink.
Oriole
That's
pink?
nipple pink in
Oh
the
yeah,
middle.
bubble gum or.
I think it's dried germaline, but
Chewed
that
up
takes
bubble
away
gum.
from my sexy statement.
I tend to say nipple pink or nipple pink
Pepto-Bismol.
or
Elastoplast pink, your favourite.
spanked flesh pink is another good
Ooh.
one.
God, Alex, you've gone all like
I do have lots of.
sexual on this.
But I mean, this is really,
But no,
this
it's
was
very-
all
this
about
is a
spanked
very-
flesh,
yeah.
though.
It's very sexual.
But that's what I mean, it's in that kind of perverted sense, which I think that's so British, that like weirdness that goes on behind closed doors. I quite like that with this. Let's talk about Thomas Tate, because Susie, you mentioned that, and so Alex nodded in agreement.
Well, all I can say is it was a bit of a scheduling shame, I think, for him, because he was up against Rihanna at River Island, and it
Shine
was
bright like a Virgad.
one for me, one of the shows of the week.
I know, I was
I think.
devastated to miss it, but divide and conquer that schedule.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing with Thomas Tate from going to them is that it's a show, it's a proper show. He knows how to stage a show. I mean, what you don't get from this is the fact there was kind of a light installation in the top, and you saw the girls coming from miles away, and you actually
Underground car park.
It was electric in a way that you imagine sort of an old McQueen show was. It had that sort of sense of someone who was very aware of putting on a spectacle as well as presenting clothes.
Well, despite going against Rihanna, he had some of the best reviews of the week.
Yeah.
So
It was it was a really
Rihanna.
electrifying. It was a
Yeah,
really
against Rihanna.
electrifying experience, but take away even from taken away from the staging. I thought the clothes were actually quite incredible, and I don't know if the pictures are doing it justice, but it is all about fabrications with him and him kind of rejigging what is familiar
For sure.
in a way that feels really, really new to
That in the
me.
middle is fantastic, and
he
again
has
this,
a high taste level on fabric.
Yeah.
So I remember when Brands brought his first collection, they were all cooing. They're like, "It's like Jill Sander."
The staging idea really interests me, though, because we all mentioned that kind of 45-minute slot, and how packed the schedule is, and there's not really that room to do anything, like theatrical in the same way.
See, I would counter the other side as you only have 45 minutes, you've got to make an impact. I want to actually remember it.
And also, there are limitations with that. Obviously, like with the Topshop venue, it is that concrete space. There's only so much you can do with that space. And it's a good thing, because that space it's a really great space.
Great space,
And I loved it when they did the projections.
Oh yeah, the
at
Topshop Unique. I thought that
show.
was actually one of the best stagings of all the Topshop kind of sponsored shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did as well.
So what's next for London? What's our hopes and dreams
Who
for
did
the
we miss?
city? Who did we miss?
Who did we miss there? Didn't we miss somebody?
We missed-
We missed Burberry.
Hundreds of these.
We
Miss
didn't do
Burberry.
Sibling. We didn't
Yeah, we
really
did
talk
Sibling.
much
We didn't talk about Sibling.
Let's
Well,
talk about Sibling.
The smaller ones in the portico rooms, things like all
John
the smaller.
Marcus and Ruben.
Yeah,
Lucas
Lucas that was one of my
Nascimento.
favourites actually.
Maria
Really.
Schwab.
Yeah. Which goes to show that London is so packed that we can't even talk about everything within the hour, even though it's like 4 or 5 days.
I mean, there's actually one thing that I do want to sorry, I keep being like, let's wrap things up, and I keep thinking of other things, which is what kind of is, because we talked about Burberry at the start of this, but this idea of what we seem to be so passionate and excited about the younger people, and I work, obviously there was the whole sort of Aquascutum debacle, and I sometimes wonder about those labels that have been around for a while and why they get a bit forgotten and how they stop themselves from being forgotten, and whether the London schedule, the sort of how busy it is, has made us a bit more kind of like
Who do you mean?
ambivalent,
Do you mean
I
like a
guess.
Clements Ribeiro? Or
Yeah,
someone
exactly,
like that?
exactly.
Because
They're consistent.
That was a
people.
really
Really
good
good.
show.
a lot of people like
That was a really good show.
heritage fabrics, punk references.
Good story.
But why have they lost that kind of buzz? Do you think that's just the kind of the curse of the
But
new?
I think, you know, they've grown up and maybe the customer and fan base has grown quietly with them.
I'm always
You know,
impressed with like John Rocher, actually. Things like that are always really nice when you see it.
And completely idiosyncratic and really done in his way.
Which I think sometimes the issue is that if you're doing your thing your way and it doesn't sync with the general mood of the times, then it is going to fall out of general
But
circulation.
someone like John is
Fans
always
will love
popular.
it.
It's actually
Yeah.
a scrum, John Roger, to get into his show. It's always...
But I think a
Got those
familiarity
fans.
does breed a degree of contempt that
Yeah.
that you stop. You know, it's like I say about Gautier for years, and he was just so peerlessly brilliant for years and years that people just got so bored.
Yeah.
And they were spoiled rotten by this amazing designer who just never ever wavered until he did. But you know, it's kind of like with John, who's just been there, just doing it. There's a few people like that.
But yeah, London is also so focused on the new and you know what's new. That,
But the
you
new
know,
establishment is who? It's Jonathan.
there,
Christopher.
yes,
Christopher.
exactly.
Yeah, and they're like in a funny way, they're the grand old men now. You
Yeah,
know?
no, they are. That's what people talk about, the new generation. You know, the
Yeah.
Simone and the Jonathan Anderson.
There's Giles. Giles has been going for 10 years.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
We didn't
Look, we
look
didn't
at
talk about
Giles.
Giles.
And I
Which
think
I
this
always
was-
Giles like sibling.
Well, I thought this was one of the
beanies.
best Giles collections. For,
Yeah,
you know, I
it's
always like it,
beautiful.
but this was very
He said it was
in the
Black
vein
Adam.
of that first Giles collection, which is one of my favourite
The,
collections
the
ever.
Helena Rubinstein collection.
I always think of it as the Margot Ledbetter collection
Ah.
because, which this was very, and he said to me it was a Tots and Vickers party. Which when you view it in that, you know, it's inspired by St. Paul's and he shows, that, you know, it felt like a very British collection, which is something that we've talked about as well. And really that idea of, you know, really looking at the craft that he can get from Britain as
You
well.
talk about naughty children. It's funny because Giles to me is just he's so grown up. You know, he's a real grown up designer. His clothes look grown up when he talks about his clothes.
He
It's
bet me a
grown up.
£5 to get Tots and Vickers into a review of his show.
And
And I did, of course. Of course I got it in.
Of course.
I've got worse things into reviews. But but yeah, no, I still think there is that idea, like Giles does still like to be provocative. He can make a beautiful ball gown, but there's no reason he can't do something provocative and funny and quirky with it, and that's actually what people sort of want from him, I think. You don't want him to be well behaved. When he's been well behaved, it's boring.
But it's much more that kind of cheeky schoolboy twist. rather
Exactly,
than
but
an
while it's
enfant
still
toga.
incredibly well made, it's, you know, it's that idea of sort of the kid at school who's really, really brilliant, but also the class clown and kind of
I have to
hides
say,
the
just
fact
looking
they're
at this
actually-
flashing by from Claire Barrow to Marius to talking about Giles, there were a lot of gowns, like full-on, full-length gowns.
Well, look at
in London.
Marius has become, like, quietly become the king of the
go-to.
red carpet. I mean, I think it's extraordinary.
So
It's
that's mean it's
wonderful.
not just
Beautiful
London about
dresses.
being about the young, because there's this kind of like flip, very successful side that's stealthily happening.
But you know, I remember in the,
Alexander
in the-
Rich and people
in the
like
olden
that.
days that London was always considered a really prime resource by American department stores for evening dresses. You know, like not designer evening dresses, but
Those kind
the
of
evening department. They'd come to London to buy
old school
evening
Frank
dresses.
Usher.
Yeah. Or probably, I don't know, Bruce
Bruce
Oldfield. or
Oldfield.
something,
Bruce
I don't know.
Oldfield,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bruce,
Catherine, Caroline Charles.
Brenda Lisi.
Does Caroline
Chelsea
Charles
design.
still
I
show?
think she's died. Maybe that's Catherine Walker.
Who's
What, like physically dead?
Yeah,
I know you
Rumors of
meant the
my death are
label.
greatly exaggerated.
maybe that's Catherine Walker. I'm not entirely sure. I was just looking at a.
Such a
There's
way
an
to
auction.
find out. as well.
There's a Diana auction happening. Diana's dresses. There's one of hers in that. So she's been on my
I
mind.
can't
What was
end on
refreshing
that. That was
actually
really
was the lack
really trying to think of something
of
else to say.
Duchess
Have
dresses
some
on the
champagne.
runway.
Oh, we've not looked at
A toast,
Sibling.
a
Let's
toast
look
to
at
absolute
Sibling.
friends.
That's
Alex wants to look at siblings.
But that's about
Sibling.
Paula Yates, so that's death again, isn't it? I can't.
Alex,
You know
are
what,
doing?
though? That is such a good point because I feel, you know, you can approach shows and you can project all sorts of heavy stuff onto them and people say, oh, it's only a dress. But there was a sort of subtext of death, I thought, in the shows in London.
It was
I
dark,
thought,
wasn't it?
yeah, but coming out of, you know, I thought Meadham's men's show was about death. And I felt Erdem's show was about death. And
Melancholy.
And Medium's
Melancholy, yeah.
But that was through Paris as well.
Yeah.
We talked
Yeah.
about that.
Okay, no, Medium you said Picnic
But it's
and
more
Rock, but I
interesting,
saw
yeah.
the yellow
Because they're
wallpaper
young.
and a lot of those kind of, you know, quite repressed mad women in the attic feelings. There was a lot of gangs.
Yellow wallpaper.
Exactly.
Why did you love Sibling, Alex? Tell us a bit.
I mean, I wrote something about it. I can't remember if I published it or not, which was about kind of postmodernism, and I like that Sibling a lot of the time is a bit like a piss take on knitwear. It's sort of like, so we'll do a fair isle and we'll do an insane, you know, we'll do a chunky knit, we're knitting on broomsticks. I went to their studio and literally there was a pile that was about 6 feet deep and had about 5 garments in it, which, because that's how big all the knitwear was. And I really like that they're not trying to do anything else. They do knitwear, and this is, you know, like the one in the middle there is an enormous lace pattern that they've knitted on giant knitting needles.
Yeah, it's nice they've not tried to, you know, slip in a little bit of like tailoring.
Exactly. No, you know, but it's very much about pushing what they can do with knitwear, and that they've got a technique and they do one thing and they do it better than anybody else. And let's really push what, it's that individuality thing again. Let's really push what we do to the very sort of zenith. And I love that this season was so different to what they've done in the past, but it all connected. It just felt really, you know, concise and sort of precise.
Precise,
Really beautifully done. The garments are amazing. It's selling a lot. It's inspired by Paula Yates. It opened with a picture of Marie Antoinette. It's sort of everything that I possibly love. They didn't play fade to grey like Prada did. If they played fade to grey, it would have been the perfect fashion show. And if there was some black leather in there.
Well, they've got spirit. I think that's what's just so attractive about them. Even though I don't love everything there, I just appreciate their spirit.
I also love it's like, you know, it's twin sets. It's knitting and it's twin sets and it's a bunch of English people, and it's so British.
But you know, it's like Jordan used to wear twin sets and sedition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I've
with a
seen
big
Jordan
sticky up here and a
everywhere.
kind of little... Yeah.
Jordan's been like those suspenders at the Wayfair were Jordan to me, like sex shop Jordan. But exactly, it's that idea, and they've said, you know, they like the idea of working within tradition, working within the sort of uniform. Again, it's uniforms, working within the uniform of a twin set, and seeing how they can push them.
You know, when
they
he's
can
talking
do.
about uniforms before, it just made me, you know, I wonder if it's how much of it is to do with Britain being an island, and everywhere else in the world there's this sense of the need to fit in. And Britain and Japan are both islands. They both have a really, really strong uniform culture, and they both have the most fantastic reactions to uniformity. And
Bonkers,
the urge,
the
the need to fit in just doesn't even exist. And I think that's why this is so strong. This is so strong here, that everybody is different. I think a big thing, another reason why I would say London is so riveting right now, is everybody seems to me, it might just be my insane bias, but everybody seems kind of charismatic as well. And that just isn't happening anywhere else. You just don't
They
get
want
a
to
sense.
talk
Well,
to you
it's
about
like
their
you're saying,
clothes.
isn't
It's
that
really
style?
nice.
It's
There is
themselves.
style
Yeah.
on every level, from the
Yeah.
way they talk
Yeah.
about their collection to the actual physical.
But I
And
think
they
the
can
fact-
talk about their clothes.
And
Yeah.
they want to. That's the thing. They're so excited to talk to you about it, to show you what they're doing, and that, you know, there's none of that reticence, none of those kind of, you know, 4 PR thing.
like
There's
PR
not the
spiel.
shy
Yeah.
retiring designer anymore, or the kind of the volatile McQueen type character. Like, oh, they can't talk to them, they'll react. You know, it's very that kind of like.
Or there are no garbos anymore. They used to be garbos.
But like I said, I just feel like you always get a sense of them in their collections, and that's what makes it so kind of evocative, you know, and so exciting, you know, that every season, you know, it's like getting a piece of them, a different piece of them every season.
That's also probably why it exports so well, because if you can't buy it, my point of view on it is, why copy Prada? Because I would rather just go and buy it from Prada. I mean, it means more if I get it from Prada. Whereas if they're doing something that you can't see anywhere else, then you want that because it's about them and it's about their label and their ethos. And you might not want to buy into everybody's, but you want to go and buy a part of them. I think that's what's seductive for people.
What's on your London Fashion Week shopping list?
God, it's going to be the longest list.
Marika Transu, I need to go and see her. Well, that's been sorted. I've actually bought menswear. I don't generally buy menswear, but I bought quite a bit of menswear. I bought some Sibling, bought some Jonathan Saunders, the little mohair.
Did you buy any J-Dubs?
Bought some J-Dubs.
What did you get? Did you get the boob tube?
Ruffle shorts?
No, that's sad.
No, none of that stuff. I got the staple neck top and something from the women's collection. I'm trying to think from this what there would be.
I'm going to get the
quite into
camel
the
men's
Paulie
that
Yates
day.
twin sets with the roses on.
I'm going to buy from the menswear.
I really want the Paulie Yates twin sets with the roses, or the trio set. I want it with the matching gloves as well.
Once again, they're
That'd be
Paul
quite
and
good.
90s.
And maybe a beret.
They'll see you coming.
Yeah.
We've got these threads. We've talked 90s, we've talked fetish, we've talked death. That was a low point. We talked about
The love of a good old
Carolyn
uniform, even
Charles.
if it's
It was-
Yeah, uniform. Sorry, it hit me.
The aftermath of the Mayan prophecy.
That's
was-
weird. History, fetish, death. Those are all quite English obsessions.
Yeah, they are.
Uniform. You know, the sort of things that this great nation has been built on.
The fact that they manifest themselves in such different ways is pretty amazing, I think.
Yeah.
That's a lovely note. Alex is really
No,
patriotic. Stab there.
What?
Our
Really
great nation.
Great nation.
You didn't think we'd come in and say, actually,
The great
Paris
fashions
beat
of
London
Britain.
hands down.
Well, you never know.
Style of the scepter dial. Oh, and it rhymed and everything.
I just think
There
there's
you
so
go.
much in London, you won't love everything, but the fact is there is that variety and it's allowed to exist. It's quite
Makes it
special.
fun.
And we aren't being paid to say that either. We generally
Yeah,
No.
I can assure you that most of these people are not advertising the British Vogue.
Disclaimer. Well, thank you very much. You guys have been wonderful.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
I can't end on a round of applause, which I hate, but we'll just wrap things
A
up.
toast.
Yeah, a toast to absent friends. That's lovely.
I know, what was
Who did we
that?
decide to
Catherine
do?
Walker.
That's so sad.
I don't know. It might be.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure.
Well, thank you very much.